Hey, good people, how you doing? David Taub here, co-creator of NextLevelGuitar.com. Hope all is going well, and I hope your guitar and musical journeys are going famously. Welcome to our Q&A session, and thank you so much for sending in your questions. We have a ton of them to get to today. They're awesome questions, and the whole nexus for these Q&A series is that I get so many great questions through email, through YouTube, that you know, so many people I'm sure would love to hear the answers to those because they're probably thinking a similar question or the same thing. So these are great because, you know, it'll give everybody access to this information. So keep the questions coming. You can post a question or a comment in the YouTube box below, or you can always email us a question if you'd rather do it like that. And you can email it to me at thenextlevelguitar@yahoo.com and ask us anything about guitar journey, about gear, about pedals, amps, about, you know, our teaching and playing, about, you know, whatever, about my dogs, about cars, I love cars, you know, about food, I love to eat, whatever, about, you know, music, songwriting. And for all the Q&A sessions, you know, at the end of the session, I'll pull a random winner, and we'll send this winner this time one of these cool Next Level Guitar t-shirts, kind of baseball style, has our logos on the front and back. From Grunge Kid. Hey David, so I understand your brother is FinbarBass, and I was wondering if you knew what happened with his channel and where he has been. Great video, by the way. Yes, that's true. My brother is Finbar, and he is a killer bass player, as well as he's done some other instructional videos and other videos for us at Next Level Guitar. He's a great musician, and he's a super cool dude. He lives near me here in San Diego. And yes, he did have this channel for many years, FinbarBass, where he taught bass and put up lots of song lessons. And eventually he just got the channel to the point where, you know, he kind of wanted to move on and do other things. And right now he's real busy with other projects, and he has been for the last few years, and that's kind of why he hasn't been posting bass lessons or doing any work for our channel. He's just wrapped up in his other project, just doesn't have the time. Comes down to time, you know, he just doesn't have the time to do the videos like he was doing in the past. And it's just his life is leading down other pathways. From Wax On 2. Wax on, I guess that's the old Karate Kid reference, right? Wax on, wax off. Yeah. He asked, what kind of in-ear monitors do you use for gigs and just in general? How do you connect them to your whole system? Is the subject covered in another of your videos? Thanks for all the great info. Unfortunately, I'm not going to have a lot of information on this because personally, I don't use in-ear monitors when I play live. To be honest, I'm not a huge fan of them. I've tried them, but I kind of like the sound of the full band. I love the sound of, you know, I use tube amplifiers and we crank them up, and I like the sound of moving that air, you know, and I like the sound of a certain energy on stage. And I get it. I know in-ear monitors are great. You could dial in the same sound and have it perfect every time, and you get, you know, CD quality in your ear. Personally, I don't need that quality in my ear when I'm playing live, right? I like the rawness of it. I like the organicness of it. But this is just me, you know. In-ear monitors are great because, you know, a lot of people love them because, you know, you can keep the stage level down, get most of the sound, you know, dialed in, you know, blasting out to the crowd. And also, like I said, the consistency from night to night to night, right? And you can really hear it well. But I like just having, you know, the monitors on the floor and getting that dialed in. And I like having the energy. For me, it's an energy thing. If we do play in a venue where there is an in-ear system that you use, I mean, I'll use it, you know. But personally, given the choice, you know, I just rather just sit there, wail away. I'm not saying it has to be tremendously loud, but I think there's that energy. And when the stage volume gets down to a certain low level, I don't know if you have that same, or at least we have that same energy. We like it, you know, pumping and going, and that's just what I like. So my apologies, I can't give you more information on that. Perhaps that's something we could do in the future though. Email question from MH, who asks, David, say you only have 1 hour a day to practice. What would that hour look like? Warm up, comma, scales, comma, etc. Or if you only had 2 to 3 days a week? Thanks, MH. That's kind of a difficult question as far as a generic kind of routine, because I would set up a beginner practice routine very differently than I would for like an intermediate or an advanced player. Or are you a player that's playing just acoustic, concentrating on rhythm, versus are you a player who's also playing, you know, lead guitar? So I wish I had some more information based on, your style of play. And if you can always email me and give me some more information and we could set something up for you. But I'll try to answer it generically as I can. Basically, what you want to do for any practice routine is you want to divide your practice routine up into sections, and you want to try to hit and work on several different areas. For instance, let's say if you're a beginner or an intermediate beginner player, right? Well, you want to break your section, your practice routine up into thirds. If you have an hour, spend 15 to 20 minutes a day on learning chords and getting chords to sound really good and to ring true and to memorizing them, right? And then you want to spend 15 minutes on strumming and rhythm, learning strum patterns, practicing your strumming and your rhythm and your timing, and working on new patterns. And then you want to spend, 15 minutes on changing chords, practicing your chord changing techniques, right? Using things I talk about in lessons like, the cluster principle, shared fingers, using all the right techniques to change chords and go over your practice progressions and work on chord changing. And then you want to have, 10, 15 minutes of fun time on the guitar where, you're learning a song or writing a song or working on things that you want to work on that are fun on the guitar. You always want to give yourself plenty of fun time on that guitar. It doesn't always have to be just about, work, 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 learn, learn, learn. So let's say if you're more of a player intermediate who's working on rhythm playing and lead playing. And it's really important, I'll just say, that you always work on your rhythm playing in tandem with your lead playing. Everybody wants to shred on guitar and be this amazing lead player, and it's great. I do too, right? But the thing is, you can't neglect your rhythm playing, because when you're jamming with other people, when you're playing in a band, you're going to be playing rhythm guitar so much, 80, 90% of your time. Solos are only small sections of songs, right? And just remember too, in the end, it's the song that's going to be remembered, right? You could play the greatest solo ever written by man, but if it's in the middle of a shitty song, who's going to remember that, right? It's the song. You play for the song. That's what's going to be remembered. So that said, your lead guitar playing, in my opinion, your lead guitar playing is only really ever as good as your rhythm playing. So again, in that scenario, you want to break up your practice time, spend, half or a third of it on rhythm, and then the other half or 2/3 on lead. So in the rhythm playing, you could be learning things like continue to expand your chord vocabulary and learning new chords, writing, songwriting, writing music, right? Working on your rhythm, maybe your rhythm techniques, adding chucking to your playing or adding, different percussive things. Things in the rhythm aspect, working on really difficult strum patterns, coming up with your own. Those are the kinds of things to really start advancing your rhythm playing, adding different rhythmic techniques to the soup, right? That you can pull out at any given time. And then as far as your lead playing, you want to break that up into, learning some scales, starting off with minor pentatonic and major pentatonic, and then going on to major scales and natural minor scales and the modes. So you want to spend 5-10 minutes on learning scales, but also then how to apply them. Studying the relationship between chords and scales is critical. Knowing all the scales won't do you any good unless you learn how to apply them over what chords sound good, what you like the sound over what progressions. Learning scales, then taking those and building licks with them, right? So you want to work 5 to 10 minutes a day on your lick building, on taking those notes and doing musically interesting things with them, hammer-ons, pull-offs, working on your string bending, developing your vibrato, things like that. Of course, 5 minutes a day on finger exercises is always great because you're strengthening your hand and building up your dexterity. I got tons of those on the website. And then also you want to work on, your actual solo process, on building solos and practicing and applying all that stuff in a real musical context, like practicing over jam tracks. That's a critical aspect of working on your lead guitar, is putting those licks in a musical situation. It's one thing to sit there and just practice licks, totally another thing to be playing them in the right timing, to be playing them over the right chords, and to be playing them in the context of a rhythm, right? So playing over jam tracks is just an essential tool for the practicing musician. So you want to spend, 10 minutes a day working on that. And, depending on where you're at in your lead guitar journey, you might want to throw in modal studies, some time on that, some time on, arpeggios, or some time on also, depending on the genre of music, there's certain techniques you're going to have to get, really good at, right? Like if you're into progressive metal or gent, you got to work on, maybe some drop tunings and, you know, in your rhythm side and learning the chords that go along with that. If you're into country, you know, music for your lead playing, you might want to work on hybrid picking, right? And how to get really proficient at that. So a lot depends on the style of music is going to push you towards, you know, what you're studying. But again, the nexus of that whole thing is dividing up your practice into a structured plan where you're studying rhythm aspects, you're studying lead aspects, and then within the rhythm and the lead, those are broken down into subsets, and you're working on all of that. And you could be working on all of that at once. It sounds like a lot, but again, you know, you do 10 minutes on each thing, and, you know, the next day, if you miss one, hit that one, right? So that's what I recommend. Here's an email question from Alan C., West Yorkshire in the UK. Hey, Alan, greetings from across the pond. Alan asks, how do I get that great sound like Gary Moore on Parsiana Walkways? Is it some kind of pedal? If so, which one? Cheers, Alan. Alan, getting the same tone of any guitar player is something that many guitar players strive toward, you know, and the best thing that I can say is, you know, you can use the equipment you have or the equipment that you want to get you in the ballpark, but you know, you don't want to spend too much time trying to emulate someone's sound, you know, perfectly, because you're never going to get there, because so much of our playing is really what's in your hands and what's in your heart, right? So much of our tone comes from, you know, how we're gripping the guitar, you know, how we hit the strings, our aggressive style, how we dig in or how we don't dig in, how we play, how we bend the strings, so our technique, so much of that. And everything that touches the guitar, whether we're using a pick, our fingers, the size of our picks, everything is going into that tone. Now I have a video lesson on the 4 ingredients of tone, what I consider the 4 ingredients of tone. I'll put that link in the text box below. Watch that, because I really go into deep onto each of those 4 things, and I use Stevie Ray Vaughan as an example. So watch that. But for Gary Moore, there are things you could do to get close to that sound. And the first thing is, obviously, he played that killer Les Paul guitar, which is an interesting story, a 59 Les Paul Standard that kind of went from Peter Green, right, to Gary Moore, who had it a long time. And now that guitar, actually, Kirk Hammett from Metallica owns that guitar. That's a very famous 59 Les Paul Standard guitar, and man, that thing just sounds so good. So first thing you could do is you could use a Les Paul style guitar. And as far as the amp, you know, probably something in the British sound, kind of like a Marshall 50 watt or maybe a Blues Breaker combo amp. Lots of mids, because his sound really cut through, but it was warm. So you might also want to put like an overdrive pedal before the amp. You know, so you run your guitar into that and then run that pedal right into the amp, and you could hit that for the leads. He did something similar to that, and that pushes the amp a little harder. You know, you could do that old trick where you kind of turn the pedal distortion down, but the level all the way up, right? And that will slam the amp a little harder and give you more of that sustain, more of that drive, singing quality. Mess around with that also for a lot of his leads. Gary Moore would switch in between, like, he would play for a little bit on the neck pickup all the way up on the Les Paul, and then he'd hit it and switch to the bridge pickup, right? And you could hear that. Listen to the solo and Still Got the Blues. There's a part toward the end of the solo, and you could hear the tone of the guitar changing. That's from switching pickups, or at least that's what it sounds like to me. I don't know if he actually switched tracks in the studio, but definitely you can hear the sound of the neck pickup versus the sound of the back pickup. So, you know, Les Paul, another trick you could do with the Les Paul to get a little bit more of that creamier sound is turn the tone knob down on the neck pickup and try experimenting with that. You can get a lot of different sounds from just varying the positions of the tone knob with the neck pickup. So mess around there too. And then try the gain about 50 to 60% on whatever amp you're using, and then you're going to have to season it to taste depending on the amp. Again, the trick here is you want to get in the ballpark. Like I said before, it's really all about your playing style. And I'll just share a quick story. Van Halen opened up for Ted Nugent one time when they were just starting out, and Ted Nugent never heard of Eddie Van Halen, and he heard him play at soundcheck, and he was just blown away. Ted Nugent was. So after Eddie went off stage, Ted Nugent talked Eddie's tech, or one of the people in Eddie's camp, let him plug into Eddie's rig. So Ted Nugent plugs into Eddie's rig, he starts playing. Guess what? He sounds like Ted Nugent, right? I mean, the takeaway from that is Eddie Van Halen could, you know, basically plug into any amp with any guitar, and he's going to sound like Eddie Van Halen, right? So just keep that in mind. You can, get close, get in the ballpark with the equipment or type of equipment that the guitar player shooting after uses. But don't spend too much time trying to get exactly like that too, because you want to do your own thing and you want to make it your own. Got a question here from Rod A. from Gabriola Island, British Columbia, Canada. He asks, just playing guitar is hard enough for me. Attempting to sing at the same time is very much out of the question. But the question is it true some of the great guitar players on stage must have someone else singing their songs as they cannot sing and play at the same time? Well, I can't speak for, the great guitar players that you refer to in your email, but I can say this: singing and playing the guitar well is tough. Just singing well is very hard. So singing and playing is doubly as hard, especially sounding good, right? Because as anyone has known who has picked up the guitar and played and tried to sing at first, it's challenging. It's very challenging, and it totally throws you off. So I can give you a few tips on that process to make it easier. As far as, I have heard some players say things like, I listened to a B.B. King interview once, and he was talking about something similar, and he says, I can't sing and play at the same time. That's why I usually just sing, and then I stop, and then I play some licks, stop, then I sing, and then I stop, play licks. And that kind of worked with his style. And whatnot. It was interesting though that he said that. He's such a humble man. If you listen to those old B.B. King interviews, what a cool dude. So I think, I don't know if it's because maybe some players say they can't sing and play. Maybe they don't like their voice. They don't like how they sound when they sing. Maybe that's it, and that's why they're saying they can't sing and play. But singing and playing gets easier the more and more you do it, and you have to have a few things down. Here's what you need to do. First of all, if you want to try to sing and play, because you're saying it's out of the question for you right now, but not if you practice this. First thing is, obviously, when you want to sing and play something, you have to have the guitar part. We're talking about playing guitar and singing. You have to have the guitar part down cold. Absolutely cold. So you're not even thinking about the chord changes. You're on autopilot. You're not thinking about the strum pattern, the rhythm, changing chords. You know the song backwards and forwards cold in your sleep. Don't even try to sing if you don't have the parts down. Because if you do, what you'll be doing is you'll be fumbling over the chord changes while you're trying to sing. And it's going to make it doubly as hard, because then you're going to be fumbling over the singing. You won't have the chord changes down, or you'll be, if you don't have the certain chord change down and it's throwing you off, you got to get that down first. So you got to get the playing down cold. And then let's say, okay, so now you have the playing down and you want to practice singing along with that. Here's a little exercise that you can do to help that. Let's just take, if you take whatever, just take a popular song. I'm just going to make up a lyric line. But if you find, most people are looking online at tabs, and you'll see, we'll just say like an easy acoustic strummer, and you'll see the line of the lyric line, and then above it, okay, it goes from an E minor, and then when it gets to this word, it goes to a C, then it goes to a D, and it goes to a G, or whatever, right? So take that lyric line. So at first, don't say the whole lyric line. Just say the word that comes up over the chord change. For instance, let's just say, every time I go to the store, I forget the milk. That's the name, that's the first line, right? So instead of trying to sing over those chords, every time I go to the store, I forget the milk, just say the first one's on that E minor, every. And then you're playing every time, every. Store, there's the chord change over store, so I'm going to say store. So every, change, store. Forget is the next one where the chord changes to the D. So every, E minor, C, time, forget, and then milk is on the D, or whatever. So what I'm saying is just say the one word that signals the chord change as you're playing. Try that for a bunch and then practice that, and then start slipping in the other words. It's a really cool exercise that sounds kind of silly, but it really works because it gets you in that habit of changing, right? As either the melody changes, the chord changes, and it's kind of like a stepping stone to getting to then where you could slip in every line. That won't work either if you don't have the changes down. So try those two things, and don't say it's out of the question for you for long. Don't beat yourself up. Playing and singing is hard, and I struggled with that too. Everybody has when they first tried it. You can do it. You just have to practice it, try it with those exercises, stay positive, and you'll get there. Here's a question from Lonnie H. from Oklahoma. What's up, Lonnie? Hey, first of all, thanks for sharing your guitar wisdom. I've been practicing for 40 years plus, on and off, mostly off, and recently ran across backing tracks to help out, but I am blasted with pop-ups. What do you think of using backing tracks for learners like myself, and what is a good source for them as a substitute for being embarrassed in front of friends? Thanks, Lonnie. Well, Lonnie, don't beat yourself up because, we all struggle in our guitar journeys, right? And sometimes our life gets to the point where, we have other things going on. We might have work, jobs, families, whatever, but the great thing about guitar is that it's there for you when you're ready and the time is right in your life to develop your skills more. As far as backing tracks, I think jam tracks, backing tracks, they're an absolute essential tool for the practicing guitarist, and everyone who's practicing lead guitar should be using them in their practice regimen. Why I feel they are so awesome is that it takes what you're playing and it puts it in a musical context. You could sit there and play licks all day long, but it's very different playing them along to a backing track, because with the backing track you're applying what you're learning in practice over a musical context. You want to play it in the right time. You want to play it in the right place. You want to play it over the right chords, right? You want to play it, to go along with the song, right? So using backing tracks is invaluable, but you want to use the right type of tracks because the market is flooded with backing tracks. And here's some of the issues. One, a lot of the backing tracks out there do not sound very good. They're just bad sounding. And what's motivating about that? My saying is life is too short to play over crappy sounding backing tracks. The tracks, you want them to sound good. You want them to sound killer because that's motivating, empowering. You're like, wow, this sounds really good, and I'm going to play something really good over this, right? So they got to sound really good. Two, sometimes when people put backing tracks together, they're not putting them together for the express purpose for learning, for practicing over. What I mean by that is sometimes people put backing tracks with so much going on and so many changes and so much happening in it, it's hard to weave a solo through all that, right? So that makes it very difficult for the student or the player trying to use that as a practice tool. So you want to get tracks that are specifically designed for learning, tracks that are wide open, so it's easy to weave a solo into. You don't want to be fighting that, especially earlier on in your guitar journey. Three, a lot of times with backing tracks, they just give you the track and they tell you go. That's it. What they're leaving out is critical information like what are the chord changes, right? What's the progression? So you either figure it out by ear or hopefully they will include that. Most of the times they don't. In all my materials, I do. Why do I? Because knowing the chords is absolutely critical. Right? When you're playing over a song, a progression, a backing track, right? Knowing the key is only a small part of it. It's the chords that give you the complete roadmap to the, soloing avenues and improvisational paths. You got to know the chords, and you got to be able to study the relationship between chords and scales so you know what chords, what scales you like the sound over what chords. Those are two critical pieces of advice, right? Always know the chords and over what you're playing over, and always try to study the relationship between chords and scales. So you want to find backing tracks. And as far as the pop-up issue, I know there's certain ways on your computer that you could turn pop-offs off. So you might want to look into that. I know that's a real pain though. So turn them off. And then the other thing is, I could tell you, I offer backing tracks that sound killer. I design them and produce them and build them for the student in mind. So there's plenty of room to weave a solo over. And also, I tell you what are the chords. I write it out for you and tell you things and give you suggestions. Well, try this scale, try this mode, try this arpeggio. Here's why it works, and here's how it works, and why does it work. So you could use a jam track as a template. That's what you want to do. You just don't want to sit there and just mindlessly just play over tracks. You want to kind of use that as a template to keep moving your guitar playing forward and practicing what you're learning. That's the trick. I'm sorry if I'm going off on this. I'm just very impassioned about talking about tracks, and I see how this can be a monumental game changer for you and your guitar, for students in their guitar journey. I'll tell you what, I'll put a link below, and in that link, click on it, I'll send you 6 free backing tracks so you can get a taste about some of the tracks that I produce. I'll send you 6 tracks, but I'll send you 2 ebooks with that too. In one of them, I diagram out all the scales to use that you might want to try, and in the other one, I talk about each track one at a time, what works over it, some things to try and why, so you can kind of, use that as a guide, then put your own spin on it. Click on that link below. I call it my Jam Track Coach. And then I have tons of other jam tracks on my website, and I have other jam tracks that you could purchase either through digital download. I have a Jam Track Vault. I also have them on DVD. I'll put some links to those products below also. But you don't necessarily have to buy them from me. If you want to, that would be great, and I appreciate it. But you want to find a company or a teacher that produces tracks in the style and genres that you like, whether it be blues or country or metal or whatever it is, jazz. There's all kinds of jam tracks being made and sold today. You just want to be sure that you find the ones, you know, that I talk about, that sound killer, that they give you the chords, that they, you know, give you some structure with it, that they make it so you could weave a solo into it, right? So try that. Let me know how it goes. Click on those links below. Here's a question from Thomas F. from Plainview, New York. Thomas, what's up? How do I strum smoothly while changing chords? I always seem to strum something in between the chord change. Tom, that's a good question. And sometimes you're going to be strumming a little bit in between changing, and that's okay, just as long as you're changing chords in time. So what you want to practice is you want to practice with what I call long progressions. And this is like a long series of chords that are atonal. Don't make a lot of sense, but it's an exercise. And it gets you in the habit of hitting chord changes at the proper time and setting goals, because some of my long progressions could be 20 chord changes, and if you could master that, man, playing a song with 4 or 5 chord changes will be like butter, piece of cake, right? No problem at all. So you want to use the right practice tools, and I'll tell you what, I'll put a link below to a video lesson where I go over a long progression and I talk about strumming and strumming in rhythm. So check that out and use those. But the big thing is, a couple tips is, when you're strumming, you don't want to be strumming too fast, because a lot of times students don't realize they're speeding up as they go along. And then what happens is, the faster you're strumming, the faster you're going to have to make the change. So you always want to practice slower and then slowly, you know, move up the dial, so to speak. Eventually you can get to the point where you're working with a metronome. You don't have to do that right now. Right now you just want to kind of be getting good at changing chords and strumming in time. You could add that later, and then you start speeding it up, right? So you want to make sure you're at the right tempo and you're not speeding up. Another thing is, you're solid on the change. A lot of times students' strumming patterns get knocked out of rhythm because they don't hit the chord change properly, because they're fumbling over the change. And besides using long progressions as practice, another thing you could do is, whenever you're playing a song or you're playing a progression or practicing and you hit 2 chords that you can't quite make in time, circle those 2, write those down in your practice log, and then you're going to practice just that change back and forth every day 10 to 20 times. And you just do it like this. Let's say you're practicing going from a D to a G, right? And you can't seem to hit it in time. Well, then just practice 1 hit each, D, G, D, G, D. Let's say you're moving your fingers first. It's a slow, you know, G, I got it, okay. But you got to kind of go back and forth until it's clean, back and forth. You can hear all the notes ringing out true, right? You can do that for any, let's say E minor to C, whatever. I mean, you could do this with bar chords if you're struggling going from whatever, like a G bar chord to an A minor open chord. You want to practice that back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Put that in your practice progression, you know, 10 times a day. That's huge, because think of it like this, especially when you're first learning, you know, those 11 or 12 open chords, and then you're adding bar chords. There's so many combinations of those chords, and a lot of them, you know, you'll get to the point where they're easy, and then you'll have, you know, a handful of hard ones. Well, you knock those out by doing those exercises back and forth and the long progression. So think of all the possible combinations on a big whiteboard, and then you just start knocking them out. And in this way, when you see songs, you're like, oh, I could do that, G to A minor. Oh, I could do that, E to C. Oh, I could do that, right? So then once you get the change down, then you got to practice easy strum patterns at first, you know, like in the video, down, down, up, down, down, up, down, up, or even just all downstrokes, down, 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 or whatever, right? But easy strum patterns first, then you work into the more challenging ones, and again, slow, then you speed it up, and eventually you'll get it. Watch that lesson. Let me know if you have any questions. Michael C. from Toronto, Canada asks, Hi, David. I thought I would ask, in the early stages of learning to play guitar, do you think it's a good idea to dabble in other instruments, or is that too distracting and a bad idea? By other instruments, it could mean keyboard, ukulele, harmonica, etc. I thought your other students might be thinking of the same question, and I would love a free t-shirt. Thank you. Well, Mike, greetings from the USA, number one. Number two, maybe you will get a free t-shirt. Watch at the end, we're going to give one away. I think studying any instrument is awesome, right? I think learning an instrument is something that could bring a person joy for the rest of their life if they get proficient at it, right? It's something that you can do that is so fulfilling and so creative, and it'll bring you such joy in a way that a lot of other things, it's different because you're creating something. I mean, it's an incredible thing. Think about it. You could grab a guitar and play a few chords or strum a few notes in a way that maybe no one has ever done before, right? Exactly like you, right? So, I mean, that's incredible if you think about it, that you could do that with whatever instrument. So I think learning an instrument, we need to instill more in our kids, in our schools, in ourselves, right? And getting proficient at it. That said, when you're first learning an instrument, it's challenging, especially guitar. It's very hard getting over the physics of the instrument and getting our fingers to bend in those chord shapes. And then we got to strum and these weird patterns in time. And then we have to change chords. Man, I'm on this perfectly good chord and you want me to go to another chord? I mean, what's that about, right? And then you got to do that. It's difficult. The learning curve is steep on guitar. But once you get over that initial stages, it gets easier. And a lot of other instruments too they have their own challenges, right? So I wouldn't take on too much at once. You'll get overwhelmed or you'll just skim over everything. Now, that's not to say you can't dabble a little bit in one and dabble in another as far as, to see what you really like. So try a few. Guitar and ukulele, obviously, there's a lot of similarities with stringed instruments. You have to build the calluses up on your fingers. You have to finger chords a certain way. So those two are very close. Guitar and piano, a little different, obviously, with piano using, two hands in a little different way. But you're still playing chords, which has the same notes, a C on guitar, the notes C, E, and G, it's the same C, E, and G on piano, right? Except on piano, the white keys are all your whole notes and the black keys are the sharps and flats, right? Little different, but, the music theory aspect of it, very similar. So I recommend, kind of sticking with one, not overwhelming yourself. Maybe dabble a little bit in another, but if you get too many, irons in the fire at the same time, unless you have a lot of time to practice and a lot of time to study, how are you going to get, really, really proficient at one? So I don't want to steal anybody's thunder and say don't do it, because I think studying an instrument is a win no matter how you slice it up. I would just say, manage your time and try not to skim over, and then maybe, put most of your effort into one, and kind of then when you get a little bit more of a handle, maybe then start trying some other ones. Here's a question from William R. William asks, here's my question. While playing a song and coming into a lead, I know there are many ways to rock out a lead, but what are your main outlooks to what you're going to do? And thank you for all your help with soloing. I've come a long way. Thanks to you. Rock on, good people. William, that's a great question. You're asking about creating a solo, right? What's the process and what are your main outlooks? What are you going to do? And basically, a few things to keep in mind is that there's not one way. There's so many different ways to go about it. And I'm sure if you ask a lot of different players, they'll all tell you something a little bit differently on how they construct a solo and why. I think a few things to keep in mind from 30,000 feet is to always play for the song. Right? Because in the end, it's the song that will be remembered. You could rip the greatest solo ever created by man, but if it's in a crappy, crappy song, not that many people are going to hear it, and not that many people are going to remember it, right? So you want to play for the song, not for yourself. You're trying to, accentuate the song or bring something out energy-wise of the song, or kind of mirror, the theme of the song. Something I try to keep in mind is melody, whether I want to create a groove in the solo, or if I want to, play a certain set of notes, a theme, and then repeat that theme later on in the solo. That's another really good thing to do. And then later on, repeat it again, change up the notes and vary it a little bit. So, it depends on what you're trying to do in the solo, or do you just want to shred and totally, you know, go crazy and rock out? You never want to kind of like shoot your load right at the gate, right at the start of the solo, because then, you know, where are you going to go from there? So maybe a slow burn and then a build into something, you know, magnificent. I like that approach. The other thing is, you know, your solo is going to be dictated a little bit by the chords you're playing over. Remember, it's always not just the key of the song that's a part of it, but the chords. The chords will give you the full roadmap to what you can use solo and improvisation wise. Also, you want to take your own style into it, you know, and you might want to do that, you know, again, depending on the song, use a certain fun effect or something on your guitar. Or you might want to play clean for part of it and then kick in the distortion for another part. I mean, there's so many different ways to go through the process. And you want to kind of incorporate the techniques that you really like that kind of gives your playing its own stamp into the solo, right? I'll put a lesson below I have on creating solos. I think it's something you'll find really interesting. So watch that lesson. I go into detail. I take a solo and kind of deconstruct it and tell you what I'm take you through my process a little bit, right? And everybody's process is different. But those are a few of the things that I think about. You know, what emotion do I want to get across? And sometimes with that, you know, that might point me to a certain mode. I use the modes of the major scale a lot because with each mode kind of gives you different mood, right? So I kind of use that to steer which direction I might go. So watch the lesson. Let me know if you have any questions. Time to pick another winner for our Next Level Guitar t-shirt giveaway, where we pick a random winner from the questions asked in this round of the Q&A. I still got some of these left. Has our logo on both sides, baseball style. And the winner of this week's t-shirt is congratulations, you won a Next Level Guitar t-shirt. I will be emailing you soon for your address and we will ship it over to you. Keep the questions coming. Remember, you can put your question in the YouTube box below, or you can also email us your questions at thenextlevelguitar@yahoo.com. Be sure to put question for David in the subject line, right? And remember, click on that link below and I'll send you those 6 free jam tracks and 2 ebooks, my Jam Track Coach. It's a killer practice tool. We talked about that a lot today in this Q&A, right? And of course, as always, remember to please subscribe to the channel. That really helps us to keep bringing the content coming. Like the video if you like it, share it, right? Subscribe. Thank you so much. I'm David Taub, co-creator of nextlevelguitar.com. Hey, keep putting those guitars in your hands every day. Keep the questions coming. You guys and gals rock, and I will see you in the next lesson. Remember, your guitar playing is an evolution. Rock on.